Good morning. I'm Katie Dutcher from Flourish and Bloom and Monterey Bay Meditation Studio. And today I really want to talk about self-care. And I have a lot to say about this. I maybe have too much to say about this. It might end up being a kind of a two-part thing for next week as well. But I'll get started at least. The first thing I want to say is that the phrase self-care, for some people has become kind of a cliche or kind of it's just like something you hear everywhere. And even the meaning of it seems to possibly have gotten a little twisted. And that's one of the main reasons that I want to talk about it. The two parts are, one, the actual idea and practice of self-care is really, really important. And then the problem is that the way that some of us are thinking about self-care is maybe really not very beneficial. So I would like to kind of discuss that a little bit. So the first thing I want to say is that the very kind of the most not what I'm talking about part of self-care is really sort of light and superficial. So when you think of self-care, and I think of this too, do we think of somebody having a pedicure or a massage or taking a bubble bath? What else? Going on a retreat. So notice that all of these things are kind of maybe what some of us would consider decadent, like we wouldn't do that every day. It costs money. Some of it costs a lot of money. It takes some of it takes a lot of time, and what's more, it may or may not be what what we are really needing or really craving. So that idea of self-care, first of all, sure, any of those things could be for you or for me, for sometimes part of of how we take care of ourselves. But I think that's really the key. This turning it around. Self-care is something that has perhaps that connotation, but really, really getting to the root of caring for yourself. Caring for yourself. That is something much, much deeper and much, I guess, more varied than that sort of decadent, luxurious type that we might think of often. Again, nothing wrong with a bubble bath or massage or any of that. Just that it's really more than that. And if we just stick with that idea, we may not really see the importance of having a practice of self-care. So, what am I talking about when I talk about self-care? I really am thinking about, I guess, weaving together self-care and self-compassion. So the first thing is that any kind of acts of self-care, behaviors or something that you do, I think really needs to be sourced in self-compassion. So much has been said and written about self-compassion, and really it's kind of a valuing yourself in the same way that you value others, caring for yourself in the same way that you care for others. It's really taking this wonderful um, quality of compassion that all of us have and making sure that we are not left out of it. That the compassion, the care, um, really the tending, the value that you give to perhaps your children, your family, friends, everyone who you love, and even strangers, people you just care for as part of the human race, that you are not left out of that. And I think that that's the big thing. That's why self-care has become such a big um, touchstone or key word, because a lot of us have left ourselves out of that equation for a really long time, or we were told that it wasn't important or was selfish to take care of ourselves. So um, when I'm thinking about this, what I think about is, what are the barriers to self-care? So I'm gonna repeat. I think first of all, there's this belief or perspective of uh, I there's like self-worth, right? I am worthy just as anyone else is, to be part of humanity, to be part of what other people and what I consider in when we tend to things, when we spend time. I am part of this. So there's that self-value there. And then compassion, that it's okay, to be kind to myself, to be gentle, to not always be kind of cracking the whip, about about on myself. Um, and so there's this attitude of self-compassion, of valuing yourself there, self-esteem, and then out of that springs actions, ways that we care for ourselves. And that's where really there's a million ways, large and small. And so and we can also think of it in terms of body, mind, and heart, um, caring for our whole selves, right? So some barriers that I would say come up when we think about caring for ourselves or having a self-care practice. I think probably the number one for many of us would be kind of a fear of self-indulgence, of being self-indulgent, right? So there's two parts of that. I think one part of it is um, about others. So feeling like if we care for ourselves, if we spend time or money or effort on something that only benefits us, or that is only, just a nice thing for ourselves, that would be selfish, um, that would be too much or over the top. Um, I would imagine that sometimes some of us can kind of pendulum over that way, where we're really, really being self-indulgent or being selfish. But I think for most of us, um, it's not going to swing that way. What we're doing is kind of correcting the balance. Um, a couple of things I'll just mention about that. Two things that help me when I think about this is, one is really the idea of pouring from a full cup versus pouring from an empty cup, with you as the cup, right? So if you want to serve others, if you want to tend to others, you probably want to do it in a way that is coming from a place of happiness, of service, of willingness, right? And we can't do that if we're feeling burnt out, if we're feeling uncared for, um, maybe unsupported. So that's one argument already for filling your cup, so that you're feeling, as much as possible, comfortable and strong and cared for and well. And and then we can go out into the world and serve and be there for other people. So these things are linked together. And again, sometimes if we're not caring for ourselves, there it grows some resentment there, because why should I care for you if I'm not getting the care I need, right? We can have that, um, perhaps legitimate question come up. and it flows together. Caring for others, caring for self. It's kind of like the self-perpetuating cycle there. So it's connected. So that's one thing I would say, is that it isn't really selfish. Um, it's part of the larger picture of compassion. Another part of that is that we could actually be part of setting an example or a role model, or of changing our mini culture that we live in. So, for example, if you're caring for yourself at work, um, that might mean that other people see that, and maybe at first they're kind of startled, and then they realize, oh yes, that's a really wonderful idea, right? Let's say you're the one who insists, like, hey, it's 5 o'clock, I go home and be with my family now. That's a form of self-care, and that could really rub off on people and affect other people in a really good way. So there are these ways that our caring for ourselves really helps others. The other part of this self-indulgence fear might be that of just in my own self, that I don't want to be a person who is kind of has this like entitled, um, too much, that kind of thing. I know you can probably tell I feel almost strange putting words around it, but I definitely feel it, of like, I grew up in a atmosphere that was a little more simple, practical, so swinging over towards caring for myself or being less productive or things like that actually is a fear. And I fear slipping over from self-care into self-indulgence. And really, that's where I think it comes down to discernment. Um, just noticing the effect of the ways that we're caring for ourselves, how it actually benefits us, how, if I stop and take a break, go for a walk, I am actually maybe more productive when I come back, versus just pushing through and it's diminishing returns the whole way. Um, so there's that discernment piece. And again, this deeper meaning, going back to this deeper meaning of caring for ourselves. Um, think about, and I'm not a parent, but I imagine, how my parents raised us, or a lot of parents that I see, and raising a child is, it comes from this place of deep love and care for this child, and at the same time knowing in the wisest sense as a parent that it, caring for this child well and doing what's best for them and loving for them doesn't mean always doing everything that they want in that moment, right? So, imagine, um, a child, what they really need is a healthy, lovely lunch. What they really want is a lollipop, right? A parent, a wise parent will not say, "Oh, that you really want that. That's what your heart's desire is. Um, have that," right? The wise parent has a bigger picture in mind, has a fuller picture of the health of the child and the well-being of the child, right? So they discern, that is more the attitude that we can take for ourselves when we think about self-care. Is it's, yes, sometimes it's indulgence, yes, sometimes it's like a treat, and at the same time it's really caring for ourselves without, um, caring for ourselves with this real care idea, right? From real love of what actually would be kindest to myself right now, as me, the whole person, not just what do I want, what sounds like a treat, right? So again, we're looking at this like deeper level to this. I'll mention a couple of other barriers that come up, I think one that comes up is the all or nothing aspect. So I talked in the last video last week about meditation, how we don't have to think that it has to be a half hour or something like that, that actually can sometimes get in the way. And we can think that really 1 minute or something much smaller can count. That can be practiced too. And I would say the same thing for self-care practice. If we are stuck on the big stuff, if we think the only thing that's self-care for me is an hour and a half massage, or um, a day at the spa, or a weekend retreat, if those are the things that count for us, well, wonderful. Maybe we can afford them. Maybe we can afford the time. Maybe we can do that a lot. But for most of us, that will mean that self-care ends up being very few and far between. Okay, so that actually, thinking that it has to be something that is expensive, that takes a lot of time and money, actually can get in the way of it being something sustainable that you get to have to do a lot of the time. So really having all different ideas about what self-care can be. And I just listed two, maybe one or two that are very small, like this decision of um, the workday is finished, I'm going home, right? That is just a simple decision that doesn't actually take any time and probably any expense at all. It's just a decision where we say, I I am allowed to have balance in my life and I'm stopping work now, right? Oh, I did mention another one. It was taking a break and going for a walk. Again, that's about balance. It's about caring for myself, and it's completely free. I it's just this intention and awareness to notice my body, my mind, my heart needs a break now. I get to have a little break. There's nothing wrong with that. A couple of other really kind of tiny things are, and again, these are kind of just personal. So I have a heated, it's kind of a small heated blanket, and it's kind of chilly right now in Monterey. And so one of my lovely ways of taking care, and I don't do it every evening, but a lot of evenings, I just turn that on and lay on top of it and read a little bit. And it's so cozy. It feels to be kind of supported by or wrapped in something warm, um, and reading a book maybe just for 15 minutes before I go to sleep. That's something that feels really nice, and it feels much better actually than what I might otherwise do, which is screen time right up until going to bed, right? So it's a caring for myself that, yeah, it's more indulgent than something else might be, but there's nothing wrong with that. And it's a small thing, right? So you get what I'm saying, that it's about, I mean, for me, I think it would be great to just make a list of like really big things, really small things, all these different ways that you could think about meeting your needs and taking care of yourself, and um, and to have a variety of things. Um, the last barrier that I want to mention is leaving it till last. So um, sometimes we put it last because we feel like there's all this other stuff that needs to be done. I need to do things for other people. I need to do my work. I need to do my tasks. And if and when I get it all done, if my whole list is crossed off, then I will do that thing I was wanting to do for self-care, right? That may be a good motivator and maybe it'll happen. However, if we think that all the time, if we put it last, if and only if something all the time, most of the time we're not going to get to it. Most of the time, that prioritizing it last is going to mean that isn't going to happen. And so again, it's about weaving it in, and that's helped by making it sometimes smaller or larger ways of taking care. So I'd love to hear in the comments or somewhere else about maybe in an email about what you think about this, and like what are your go-to ways of caring for yourself? What have you learned about self-care? And do you have questions? Do you want to argue with any of this? That would be interesting too. Just to kind of drive it home here, this is what I think about a self-care practice. I think one, it's personal. It's about what you need to take care of yourself, not what I need, not what anybody else needs. Okay. Um, for someone, for example, going on a hike would be just this amazing way of healing yourself in nature. For someone else, that sounds like a real chore. Um, Self care is not the same for every single person. So personal. The next thing I would say is variable, right? Just like any other practice we have, it will work best if we can scale it up and down depending on what our needs are for that day, what our time is available for that day. If it's something that can take 1 minute to a week, to have that kind of variability in it means that it's going to be more sustainable. So personal, variable, and daily. I really think it's with any practice, it's about regularity of it, because the more we get in the habit of thinking of it, it kind of builds on itself. And again, remembering that it's a benefit to you and it's a benefit to everyone. It's all connected. So I'd like, if you could join me in a very short meditation to close here. Right where you are, this will just be a couple of minutes. Letting your eyes close. Just sitting here. Not trying to do anything. Not trying to change anything. This right here can be seen as a moment of caring for self. Taking time to stop doing and just be. Time to stop efforting. To just be enough right here. letting yourself feel the nourishment of the breath. Feel its gentle movement. In a moment, I'll ring the bell. Thanks for being with me. I really would love to hear from you and your thoughts on this. And I'm wishing you many, many moments of caring for yourself today. See you next week.